Medical Affairs, MSLs, and Risk Management. We're really excited to have you join us today for this discussion on the evolving role of medical affairs, the critical legal and compliance considerations that's currently facing pharmaceutical organizations. Now, as you join, please feel free to introduce yourself into the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. We always have attendees that are joining us from all over the world, and we're thrilled to have such a diverse audience participating in today's conversation. Now, while you're putting into the chat where you're joining from, I'll allow about 1 to 2 minutes to allow attendees to join in, and then we'll officially get started. Okay, I see a lot of East Coast, West Coast. I also see India. I see the UK. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you all for today's warm introductions. The chat that you just entered into is also where you should leave questions throughout the webinar today. We'll try our best to answer those at the end from our speakers. But just by way of introduction, my name is Kiana Dixon. I am the Pharmacist and Associate Director of Educational Programs here at the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs, and I will act as your host this afternoon. The goal of today's webinar is to provide you with practical guidance and expert insights on navigating this complex landscape of medical affairs, mitigating legal risks, and fostering a culture of compliance within your organization. To help us explore these topics, I'm honored to be joined by two distinguished speakers in the field today. First, we have Luca Quagliata, the VP and Global Head of Medical Affairs at Thermo Fisher Scientific. Luca brings to the conversation a decade of experience leading international medical affairs teams, and he's also a board-certified medical affairs specialist. Also joining us is Elisa Philman, Managing Partner at Rodman Employment Law. Elisa is a seasoned employment litigation attorney with extensive experience representing clients within the pharmaceutical industry. Luca and Elisa, thank you both for being here today. Please feel free to take a moment to introduce and share a bit about yourselves for our attendees today.
Elisa, please start.
Ladies
All
first.
right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Kiana, and for letting me go first, Luca. Much appreciated. I'm happy to join you all today. I'm joining you from Boston, Massachusetts. It's an important topic that we're discussing today, so I'm glad to participate, and I'm glad that there are so many people here as well. As Kiana said, I'm the managing partner of Rodman Employment Law. We are a Massachusetts law firm specializing in employment litigation specifically. In that context, we've had a lot of pharma employees. Pharma employees who are coming to us from the range of things that any employment practice might face, discrimination, wage and hour laws, but also in the context of observing things that go against compliance in their daily lives, recognizing that there are compliance issues and kind of what should I do about that. There's including of course some whistleblowers. So I look forward to the conversation today, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, welcome as well from my side, joining today actually from Barcelona as I'm attending the ESMO, the European Medical Oncology Annual Conference. But it's a pleasure to be with you, and thanks, Chiara, for the invitation. Elisa, thank you as well for participating and doing this one together with me. I'm very happy to take part of this event, as I believe that the topic that we will be discussing together, it's of critical importance. In my personal experience, now more of a decade in the medical affairs field, where I currently serving Thermo Fisher Scientific as Vice President and Global Head of the Medical and Scientific Affairs, there's been a number of situations where I wished, honestly, to have a lot of support regarding litigation. And I have to say that my legal colleagues in the company that I'm working in and the company that I've been working previously, they have been growing as the field is expanding. So I believe that a lot of expertise has been accumulated in this very specific topic within the last decades. Now we're much more ready to face any kind of litigation in the medical field, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. And so we'll be discussing about this one today, and therefore I'm looking forward for an interacting opportunity.
Thank you. Me too. I'm really excited about today's discussion. It's a little bit different than what we've had previously, where we discuss career webinars, where we have interview style webinars of different topics, but not one deeply into risk management for medical affairs. So I'm really excited. Now, as we kick off today's webinar on, again, field medical and litigation, I really want to start by priming with a few recent cases that have raised these important questions, right, about compliance, governance, the ethics of the pharmaceutical industry, really the cause and the need for today's type of webinar. The first case involves a major pharmaceutical company that was investigated for violating the FCPA, or the Foreign Corruption Act. The company's subsidiary was found to have engaged in various bribery schemes, including paying healthcare providers to attend medical conferences and compensating influential KOLs or key opinion leaders to increase prescriptions of the company's products. And what's particularly concerning here is that the investigation revealed significant failures in the company's internal controls, right, and their compliance oversight, which we'll discuss today. Employees, they were able to falsely record these improper payments as legitimate business expenses, and the company's internal audit processes failed to identify and address these systemic issues in a timely manner. In another recent example, a biopharmaceutical company faced backlash after reportedly pressuring a patient advocacy group to censor a video that criticized the company's new therapy treatment. And this incident itself sparked widespread debate about the ethical responsibility of pharmaceutical companies to maintain transparency and to engage constructively with patient communities, especially patient advocacy groups, as we see that medical affairs teams, they're evolving to now participate and engage with these types of groups more and more over time. Now, the pharmaceutical industry must probe its societal value as well. And these cases that we just mentioned really highlight the growing complexity, heightened scrutiny facing medical affairs teams today. And as the role of medical affairs specifically continues to evolve, it's critical that organizations have robust compliance frameworks. They have to have strong internal controls, right? A culture that prioritizes ethical decision-making. And that's our discussion today. To help us navigate these challenges, this is why we brought together these two distinguished experts. Luca, the global head of medical affairs at a pharma organization, as well as Elisa, a seasoned employment litigation attorney. And over the next hour, Luca and Elisa will share their insights on the legal implications of the evolving medical affairs landscape, strategies for building compliant and effective teams. We'll identify the societal value of pharmaceutical teams as well, and then also cover some best practices for proactively addressing compliance challenges as we look towards the future. Now, let's dive in and go ahead and begin learning how medical affairs professionals can navigate this new era of heightened compliance and risk management. Remember, please ask your questions into the chat that you may have throughout the webinar, and we will address those at the end. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, Luca, as we've discussed, medical affairs organizations have grown more complex over time. To you and your perspective, what potential compliance and governance challenges have arisen as a result of this?
Yeah, Kiana, first of all, thanks for the introduction, and I hope we can hit on all the different topics that you have highlighted in your background, because this will make the discussion extremely complete. Now, to your question, we collectively, I think, can agree that overall the investment in pharma, biotech, and diagnostic company in the last years in the medical affairs teams and in the expansion of this team has been really substantial, which is a good thing, of course. But when there's an increase in size and in complexity, also there's a additional compliance and governance challenges, of course. And one of the things that I personally observed in the field is the lack of consistency. I think you have mentioned some very unfortunate events that happened recently, which caught a lot of attention in the field. And one of the problem in these very specific situations was the lack of consistency of communication within the company in one case, and externally with external shareholders. So I think as the medical affairs field in general and the number of medical professionals in the medical fields is expanding, it is important to try to find the right level of balance, but also it's important to build a lot of know-how. And that's why programs that do build know-how and that lead to a certain standard within the field, I think are very much welcome to make sure that the bar is as high as possible across the entire field. There's maybe another thing that I really like to mention, and it's about complexity within different geographies. In a global company such as the one that I'm serving today, compliance can have different phases depending on which part of the world you are. Although there are, of course, some very general practical things that you would apply anywhere, no matter where you are, there are also substantial differences in the different region and across the different regions. And therefore, again, it's very important to build on the know-how of the team, knowing what they're doing. Another thing that I believe is kind of challenging and we should be reflecting on is related to data privacy and security as well, especially if you think about the fact that the utilization of real world evidence is something that it's really increasing, and I think it will increase even more and will help the field, but it is posing some kind of challenges when it comes to compliance. Think about everything that is going on with the GDPR regulation in Europe, the HIPAA in the United States. So I think it's again critical that we build medical professionals that have the right level of know-how to understand this complexity in order to be compliant. And so in training, it's actually what it's very much still needed in the field. I will close now with another last point that I believe it's important, and it's related to the interaction between the medical affairs team and the commercial teams, which of course it's always a big discussion internally, externally within the field, and it's of course essential that we continue to maintain a very clear separation, so that we ensure the soundness of the medical and scientific affairs team and the unbiased support in terms of engagement, for example, with stakeholders. So it seems to be all very crystal clear, but I just want to close by saying that the increase in size of the investment and increase in size in general of the medical affairs team, it's also corresponding in an increase in complexity. And so there is still a lot that I think we need to figure out and make sure that medical affairs professionals are in fact well equipped in order to face the complexity of the system. We are on the right path, I believe, but we are not yet there.
Gotcha. What I'm hearing from you is that the larger, the bigger the team is, the more likely you are to have ambiguity across your team members, right? The harder it can be to make sure that there's actually consistency across the board. You mentioned that term standard, and setting that standard across the board, across your entire team, especially you, someone who's governing a global team from different regions as well, setting that standard and ensuring that all your team members are meeting that standard, I'm sure it can be difficult. And I'm really excited to discuss in our next conversation how you set that standard, or how you encourage your team members to reach that standard as well. Now, Elisa, from your perspective as an attorney that has worked on litigation cases involving pharma, What are some of these key legal implications of this evolving role of pharma? Right? What are you seeing from individual professionals in pharma that you have represented?
It's a great question, and I'll start by echoing Luca that absolutely, as the team gets bigger, there's more and more complexity there. There's more and more opportunities for ambiguity, and that puts a lot of pressure, I think, on the individual team members in medical affairs and in commercial as well, of course, to deliver consistent answers to questions and to have specific standards about how to deal with particular problems that arise. And it's of course important for the individual's boots on the ground, but it's also important from the perspective of a risk analysis and protecting the company, and really protecting the individual employees to the extent that they could be personally liable for an issue that arises. And that's because when the government comes knocking, the first place they're going to look is medical affairs. They're going to look at, what are the systems that are in place? What are people told to do? How are they told to respond? And the more robust that system is, the more robust the training program is for those individuals, the better. I've heard from my clients that, as medical affairs continues to evolve, they find themselves being more strategic partners in the whole apparatus. That means there's more demand for, there's an increasing demand for evidence, so real world data, analysis of clinical trials, that kind of thing. And all of that evidence is great, right? It helps move the ball along, helps get things where they're supposed to go. But it also means that there's more evidence for judges and auditors and the government to look at as well. So it's extra important, not just from a day-to-day perspective, but from a perspective of how is this going to look, when and if the company is ever looked into by the court or the government, to make sure that evidence aligns with the standards and the practices that have been established.
I see. So what I'm hearing from you both is that more complex, we can say that the medical affairs team is evolving. And as it's evolving, it means more eyes is on the medical affairs team. When you have more eyes, more visibility, you have more scrutiny to those teams. Elisa, from your legal standpoint, how do you think companies can avoid these pitfalls that they may encounter?
I feel like it's kind of obvious based on what we've been saying, but it's absolutely true that the lack of uniformity in standards can be a pitfall. I'll have a client that will come to me and say, I was asked to do something that I think is outside the norm. I'm worried about it, and without guidelines, concrete guidelines, a basis for understanding and training, they feel like they're, kind of floating in air and have no grounding. So, I mean, SOPs are probably the key, really having thoughtful, vetted, comprehensive, involving legal, involving compliance, and accounting for those gray areas, which can be difficult. But that's going to be the key to providing as much risk mitigation as possible. And I don't want to understate it. I mean, it's certainly a lot of work to put together those SOPs, especially when there are areas that are naturally gray. It's very difficult to account for every single possible iteration of what might come up. But that's, I think, actually why a program like the one offered by ACMA is worthwhile, because you set that standard, right? Everybody who has that certification has the basis, the knowledge in order to execute on those SOPs. And I think that ultimately it's a great way to mitigate risk.
I agree. The presence of having those standards, especially through a board certification of knowledge and of practice, really helps to remove at least one level of ambiguity. We have done the research, and 70% of compliance leaders, they report that implementation of a board certification program mitigates risk in their eyes. And that brings me to you, Luca. As someone who manages a large team, how do you maintain consistency across the board? What strategies can other senior leaders implement to promote uniformity and compliance across a large organization?
Thank you very much, Kiana. It's a great question, and again, I also want to echo what Elisa said. I'm totally aligned with her view, and going to your question, it's in my personal experience, starting by framing a global compliance document, basically a framework, it is the start. But then this framework needs to be flexible enough in order to adapt to the different local regulation, which, as I just mentioned before, they are not the same. Still, the core principle of what are, or what it's inside this global compliance framework should be all the same, and principles that are associated to transparency should be above everything else. In fact, is the lack of sometimes the lack of clear direction and transparency that generates or might generate some kind of issues later on down the roads. So having this one crystal clear, written in stone, if you want, I think it's a very good start, no matter where you are in the world. But then allowing again the right level of flexibility based on local regulation. And the other thing, as we already heard, but it is really one of the most important thing is the consistency. And the way you build consistency in a large team is to make sure, as we said before, once again, is that the bar is at the same level for everybody. So training programs are important. I think are essential, especially even more as we will continue to see growth in the medical affairs team. And these programs should cover from regulatory aspect all the way down to internal policy, ethical guidelines. There's a number of things, core, if you want know-how, that needs to be part of these training programs. And again, the one offered by ACMA is a great example of that. I believe the field is moving into the direction of almost having a certification for medical affairs as a must in order to enter into the field. I'm not somebody that likes to force things, but I truly believe it is the way to go, because we see a huge level of heterogeneity in the field, which is not helping. But the last thing that I want to mention is that when, again, in large and extensive team, it's the importance of monitoring almost in a real time, if you want, what is happening in the field. It's like a continuous auditing system that needs to be in place. This is something that can really help you to flag immediately whenever there's a problem, and therefore intervene in order to protect the company, the individuals, and in the end, at least in my very specific case, the patients, which are the one that we are really serving at the end. If we are uncompliant, at the very end of the day, we are harming the final users, so to say, the most important users, which are, again, in my case, the patient. And this should never happen.
What I heard from you both is some of the strategies that any medical affairs team should have, whether small or large, are standard processes, right? So those SOPs, standards such as the BCMS program that we offer at ACMA. Luca mentioned having those set standards, yes, but some that are tailored and customized to your specific region, which I could imagine is important for a senior leader that manages a global team, right? And with BCMS, we have those international regional versions of BCMS for that specific reason, as a standard of training and education of knowledge and processes in medical affairs, which you then build on top of within your internal processes. I also heard appropriate monitoring processes in place to increase transparency across the board as well. In the conversation of the evolving role of medical affairs, one that we keep hearing come up often in the news is the societal impact. And we hear terms like sustainability, ESG, right, when it comes to environmental, social, and governance. And before maybe a decade ago, this has really been for other industries. And now we're hearing it more so with the pharmaceutical industry. Luca, how is pharma incorporating ESG considerations into their medical affairs strategies?
Yeah, another great question. I mean, ESG is a top priority, I would say, for most of the large pharma biotech diagnostic company in the field at this time. And I think it's not just to please the market. So someone is thinking, we have to do this one because you have to please the market. That's the way to go. I think that's the wrong approach. I think the companies that are succeeding are the ones that truly believe in their ESG program. And medical affairs will be more and more contributing to this program in the future. First and foremost, because for pharma, medical affairs is the face of a pharma company at the end of the day. We are the one in front of, key opinion leaders. We are the one that are, in fact, shaping the future of the company with the things that we do out there in the field and with the medical and scientific soundness. So I think the activity of medical affairs in relation to ESG will grow in the future. But what it's important is, let me give you some practical example. What are we doing? And it's not just us. For example, reducing the carbon footprint, it's an important thing, right? And medical affairs team is a field team. Take my example today. I'm here in Barcelona. I had to fly to come here. But the size of the team that we have today out here, it's half of the size of the team that we used to have just a few years ago. And this is because we are trying to avoid to have people flying all around the globe all the time. Not just because we want to save money. To be honest, it's not the way you make money by saving money on these things. It's because we want to reduce our carbon footprint. And it's something that we truly believe. But also everything that is related, for example, to more environmental friendly packaging, it's an important thing. Very often, drugs or medical devices or diagnostic assay that we provide around the globes, they do have a very strong carbon footprint because they need to be shipped everywhere, and also because they need to be shipped using cold chain supply, which is really, really something that can have a huge impact. We are really working a lot trying to reduce this one. And it's also important that we as medical affairs make our key opinion leader understand that this is a priority for the field and for the company that we are working for. Maybe another thing that I want to mention again is about the governance piece of that one, and how we can make sure that people understand that transparency and ethical standards is really something that truly matters in the interaction with healthcare professional and with patient advocacy group. We often give it for granted, but again, you started by giving two examples where it was granted, that people wouldn't do that, and in fact, that's exactly what they did. So I think we should never actually give things for granted, and we should make sure that there's a true commitment from medical affairs in embracing what the ESG programs are in the field. I will close by saying maybe one last thing that I think is, again, truly a business priority. If you just have an ESG program that it's a nice looking but full of empty words kind of program, you might please the market, but you will fail in the long term. If your people are not truly committed to the core value of the program, and therefore they need to have the tools to understand these core values, there's no way your business it's going to do well. And again, medical affairs can play a critical role in making sure that the ESG program are truly beneficial for the companies that are embracing them.
You made some really good points. Luca highlighted some key components of a successful ESG program at a pharma organization. And honestly, I think this is a topic that we could really dive into more, maybe even have a separate webinar solely on ESG. And as we talk about the societal impact of medical affairs, I'm interested in, Lisa, what are the potential legal consequences of failing to address the societal impact of medical affairs that Luca mentioned?
It's a great question, and there's a reason why no one's excited when there's lawyers in the room. That's because we always recognize the risk, we always recognize the potential legal consequences, and frankly, if pharma companies and they're, all the way down to the individuals, right, the individual contributors can't deliver information to stakeholders, HPCs, patients, et cetera, in a competent and ethical way, they not only run the risk of, harming the business, but, in the short term, but there's also a very significant risk of harming the business and themselves in the long term. And that's because a lot of that stuff is governed by, federal laws. And of course, I can't speak to the international laws that affect this sort of thing, but in the United States, there are many laws that govern the pharmaceutical companies, both at the state level and at the federal level. And each of these laws, they're not just a slap on the wrist if you're found to have violated something like that. There can be multiple damages. There can be fines, both criminal and civil fines for failing to adhere to the regulations. You can even face imprisonment, attorney's fees, that kind of thing. And that is not just holding, somebody at the top liable. You could end up holding somebody who's more boots on the ground liable if they knowingly participate in these sort of things. So it's not just a question of, should we be ethical? Should we do the right thing? There's real significant legal consequences potentially if that's not what is done, which is really why, being able to say, look, here are the standards, here's what we've been doing, kind of eating away at like a knowing violation is really important. And pharmaceutical companies can do a lot to set themselves up for success in that way with these SOPs, with these compliance programs, that kind of thing. I do also want to mention that for many of the statutes, there is a whistleblower component, which means that an individual employee can recognize an issue with compliance. Maybe their supervisor is not following the rules. Maybe maybe there's kickbacks, et cetera. And they themselves can stand in the place of the government to file a lawsuit. They can also file a lawsuit on their own behalf if they've been retaliated against for bringing a complaint. So it goes beyond just, hey, I think we might be, towing the line a little on this one regulation. It can turn into a much, much larger thing, as we saw earlier with the cases that you cited this morning, or earlier, excuse me, Kiana.
I agree. And, you mentioned the financial implications. That's usually what we see as the headline or the tagline of a news article, right? Usually, if a fine goes up to the higher level, to the organization itself, they could reach up to the millions or even the billions of dollars as a result, as an implication of failing to address not only the societal impact or just regulations as a whole that have been set forth internationally or nationally here in the U.S. Now, before we close out and head to the question and answer section, I'm really interested in both of your perspectives on the future of medical affairs. Luca, you mentioned BCMAS as one of the ways you perform or introduce uniformity across your team. I know that you yourself are board certified and many of your colleagues are through BCMAS. How has that helped to address compliance challenges as we look towards the future?
A lot, really a lot. And believe me, not because I'm board certified myself, although I was the first one, in fact, in my team. We have a lot of new people coming in the medical affairs team, and maybe they have a very strong medical background. We have from oncologists to pathologists in my team, laboratory director, people that worked at the hospital, like myself, for a few years. And they're very strong in the medical part, but not necessarily in the other thing, including, the regulatory part of the story. So, and they've been hired because of their medical know-how, but it's not enough. It's absolutely not enough. And I can tell you, heterogeneity, it is very common in the field. The certification, it's what brings consistency. And consistency, it's what is needed in order to reduce the risk for, again, litigation later on. So I feel very comfortable now that a lot of my team members are either certified or are in the process of being certified, because I know that I can speak, the same language with them. We now have a common, language. I know that they will understand me when I will use certain kind of terms because they have been trained for that. They got the knowledge about that one, and so I think it's critically important. And one maybe another important thing is that as a field, general reflection as a field, forget about my team now. I think being board certified in general in the medical fields, it brings credibility to the entire field. If people that we're sitting in front of know that we are certified for doing what we're doing, I think again it speaks volumes about our ability to increase the level of credibility that we have, not just for the proximity stakeholder, but also for the entire society. Again, I think will be helping to being recognized and seen in a very different way if we do raise the bar for all of us in the field. I think this is a critical path for a successful future of the medical and scientific affairs teams at the global level.
Now, from you both, what do you see as the future of pharma in general, or specifically for medical affairs? What new challenges and opportunities do you think that companies may face in the coming years?
Well, Lisa, I don't know if you want me to.
No, go ahead. I think you probably have some things to add on that question.
No, I think that the point is that there's this historical, if you want, misunderstanding that, and again, it's also a perception mostly outside of the pharma, medical device, medical diagnostic field, that in order to make more profit, you have to do something that it's unethical. It couldn't be more wrong. They actually are all very worried of doing the right thing at the right time and always. And in fact, making sure that we are compliant and following a high ethical standard is the only way to win in business. Companies that truly embrace compliance at all the different levels, of course, including the one in medical affairs, are on a winning path. And medical affairs, I think, can shine within this piece of the story by demonstrating that keeping the standard as high as possible will have potentially and concretely a huge positive effect on the business. Not again, but to cite the case that you mentioned before, somebody made a decision, a very bad decision, to make more profit in the short term. The problem is that you're paying 10 times that later on down the road by being uncompliant. So it's a very short-sighted, blended decision, and it's all often made by executives that only live quarter by quarter. If you want to make sure you have long-term success, you are the first advocate internally and externally of compliance. And again, that's where medical affairs can shine.
Now, Elisa, from a legal standpoint, as it relates to litigation challenges, do you see any challenges or opportunities that may face pharma in the coming years or in the future?
Well, I think it's impossible to get the risk of litigation on any of these issues down to zero, right? That's just never going to happen. But if you look at cases under these laws that I've been talking about, these federal laws, there is a component of knowing what you're doing and whether or not that violates the law itself. And there's a legal definition for knowing under a lot of these statutes. It's not just actual knowledge. So you can violate, for example, the False Claims Act by giving the government, presenting to the government a payment for Medicare, knowing that what you've billed for is not, accurate. It's not what it was supposed to be. If you actually know, sure, that's obviously a violation. But there's another level of that, which is, kind of a reckless disregard for the truth. You should have known, you should have looked at it. And when the government looks in, when they open they open things up and they want to check out, what was going on, what do people know, did they do things intentionally, did they not do things intentionally? one of the things that they're going to be looking at is, again, is it actual knowledge? Or is it some sort of blend of we should have been paying more attention and that kind of thing? So I think that when we think about future challenges in litigation, we're going to be seeing more of using the defense of these systems that are in place to the idea of like a not being actual knowledge, right? A mistake can happen. We know mistakes happen. But when the government looks in, or when a fact finder like a judge looks in and looks at the evidence, if they see this company did whatever they could to ensure compliance, they had programs, they had documents, they had SOPs, all of their people were certified, for example, they're much less likely to find that what happened possibly accidentally was intentional, was an actual knowledge. And that can affect whether or not there's liability at all. It can also affect what the damages would be. A court is less likely to order, punitive damages all the way up to the maximum if they think, look, they did as much as they could. And courts will look at that. They will look at what has been, what systems are in place in order to ensure that those kinds of violations do not occur. So I think as more and more companies adopt these standards, offered, through organization, but also, just SOPs in general and other kind of standard setting instruments, the risk is going to go down. Again, never to zero, right? But the risk can go down based on those kinds of implementation of those kinds of things.
I agree. This entire conversation has been really more about risk management, right? Instead of, like you mentioned, how to be devoid of risk. There always will be that level of risk present, but how could we minimize that? What strategies can we put into place in order to, again, mitigate that risk at some level? I see a lot of questions coming into the chat, and I want to have enough time here at the end to at least address as many as we can. So at this time, I'd like to open the floor to those questions that may exist for our speakers. All right, here's one. Is there any scope for startup? I am looking for some resource for it. I'm assuming you're asking what resources are available for maybe tips on compliance for a startup company. I'd say here for ACMA, like we've mentioned here on the call so far, the webinar is researching our BCMS program. If you have any questions on how this could potentially help you mitigate risk or at least start something for your team at a startup, reach out to us and we can help you there. We also have accreditation standards for an entire organization. If you don't have those SOPs in place, reach out to us and our advisory services can help you build out what those should look like. So if you have those questions, again, reach out to us and check out our website as well.
And Kiana, may I just have one very quick thing? I hope it's relevant. Again, false misconception. It's not that if you are a startup, you have to be uncompliant simply because you are a startup. The fact that you are maybe a larger organization, it means that this level of scrutiny on you could be higher. But, and we have here, Elisa, I mean, the law is the law. It doesn't matter where you are, and it doesn't matter how big or small you are. So you have to make sure that you have, again, the right people with the right training, no matter no matter what kind of setting you are in.
Perfect. From Heidi, Elisa, what are some common issues medical affairs team members are approaching you with?
Oh, it's a great question, Heidi, and thank you for that. A lot of my clients work in pharmaceutical companies, perhaps in the medical affairs area, and also in other departments within the organizations. I get people who are worried about conduct that's occurring that might be in violation of these various laws that I've referred to. So I get people who say, I was asked to do XYZ and I think it was, outside of the normal course. What can I do? I complained to my supervisor and was, taken off the next team meeting. Is that legal? What can I do? So we get a lot of people who are coming to us with concerns that are happening in real time. We also get people who are, they're dealing with maybe they're being blamed for the conduct of a fellow team member. I was told by my supervisor it was okay to leave these materials at the doctor's office or what have you. And then when I complained about it, I was taken off the team. I was moved. My bonus was reduced, etc. And so we get a lot of people who are kind of in that real-time moment of, what do I do? My livelihood is at stake here. My reputation is at stake. I know that there's risk, but I also, I need to do my job.
I work for one of the top 20 big pharma companies, and we are seriously considering implementing the ACMA BCMS program for our field medical team for some of the reasons that Elisa mentioned. Can you please address any experience with this, Luca? Oh, Luca, you're on mute. I see your mouth moving.
Sorry about that. Sorry, apologize. Yeah, sure. Try my best. So my team, within my team, I have to say that we basically almost we didn't force this one, but I almost implement this one as a must, for all newcomers within my team. So everybody who's joining my team either needs to be board certified or will have to complete the board certification within a certain period of time. And having it, to be honest, it's already an advantage to be considered for whatever position we are opening. Now, implementing this one across the entire company, this is not something that we have done yet. We have done this one in certain pockets of our company, as we have multiple medical affairs for the different indication that we are supporting. The one that I am supporting specifically is oncology. And again, within our specific therapeutic area and technologies that we are supporting, we have decided to go for it. And to be honest, I'm extremely pleased with that.
If you have more questions on insights on how to deploy BCMS for your entire team, we've done that with other teams before as well, both individually and that team deployment. Reach out to us. We can give you more information or tips and tricks as well. From Heidi, Luca, if you were at a small diagnostic company, how would you convince your CEO to move MSLs under medical affairs versus commercial? I am not having any luck, just pointing out that other companies are not organized in this manner.
That's well, first of all, it's not about whether they want to do it or not. They have to do it. Medical affairs is a non-commercial function, so you cannot be reporting to any commercial leader. That's just completely a no-go. There's no way, that an MSL could be reporting to a commercial leader. Also, because the way that MSLs have, are measured, their KPIs are strictly non-commercial. So there's no dollars that is associated to the work of an MSL. It can't be. It's absolutely not possible. So first of all, it's compliance. So go tell your CEO that this is the industry standard. So if you want to avoid having financial and litigation problem, we have Elisa here can help us with that. You should definitely make a change. There's another thing maybe that it's on top of compliance. It's a right business decision. And I tell you why. Medical affairs people, because I know, of course, that there are other teams that are reporting to commercial leaders. Medical affairs professionals, MSL, that are reporting to commercial leader, they are not as efficient and they are not as, delivering not as good result as MSL that are reporting to the right organization, which is, again, the medical one. And the reason, again, it's associated to the KPIs. If you are a non-commercial person, but you are forced to bring in dollars, you feel very, disoriented. And so, again, there's compliance reason and business reasons for doing that. Right. Probably that's for me as well, I guess. yes, again, there's another, I think, misconception in the field that probably, again, lack of consistency, as we said before. People tend to think that there's an overlap between the targets or qualified targets from commercial people and the one that medical affairs have, and that's actually not true. There should never be a one-to-one between, what a marketing or a commercial team is targeting versus, the target list of an MSL. So in other words, and I unfortunately experienced this one in the past, people tend to think that the biggest KOL that you have on your list are also the one that are generating more revenue for the company. It's completely wrong. You can have some key opinion leaders that are not such big revenue generators for your company, but they are still very important for your medical affairs team because of the medical and scientific know-how that they have. And on the other hand, it might be that the very top of your revenue generators, so it's top of the target list for commercial, it's not part of your speakers bureau, or it's not part of your advisory boards or anything like this. And medical affairs should not be influenced by the metrics and the numbers that are driving the commercial target list. So they should be absolutely separated.
Sorry, I'm on mute. From Dr. Karan, applied to common medical affairs projects, symposia, ATP engagement, etc. Does anyone have a good overview what the differences are in terms of what is and what is not allowed? In global companies, we often have to deal with differences in compliance interpretations and formal legal constraints at the local country level.
But sorry again, Elisa, I think it goes also partially in my direction.
No worries.
Again, I think that's where the training will help you. I mean, it would take me an entire webinar to try to cover what's allowed and what is not allowed. But if you're board certified, you know exactly what it's allowed and what it's not allowed, because you got the right level of know-how for doing that. So I think these kind of questions really highlight the value of having, the right level of trainings, and why, global companies should have their medical affairs team being certified, so that the team knows exactly what it's allowed and what it's not allowed. But then on top, I think it's also very important that there is the right level of alignment between the medical affairs team and the legal supporting team, because sometimes, in previous and past experience, it happened that medical affairs thinks that the legal team is always there to say no. That's not the case. It's always there to mitigate risk and always there to make sure that we are not infringing the law. It's a different thing than having the perception of them saying, no, that's not doable. But as well, we need to educate and work together with our legal colleague to let them understand, what could be done, could not be done, because they are also not trained every time for that. So I think there's a level of exchange that needs to happen between the different teams in order to make sure that they are aligned. But again, if you want to know more about it, get certified.
I agree. I'm biased, of course, but in our programs in BCMAS, our international regions, this is what we cover. While we lay out the foundation that's the same across the board, right? Those business acumen skills that you should be aware of as an MSL or as a medical affairs team member, we also dive into the regulations specific to your region, both compliance and governance. When it comes to the US version of BCMAS, of course, we'll dive into the Pharma code and FDA regulations. But if you enroll in the BCMAS Europe version, right, we dive into the regulations specific to the EMA and to those that are in the European region. So please, if you have any information or questions specific to international regions, reach out to us. Check out our website, acmalifesciences.org. We have plenty of information there, as well as our contact information if you want to speak to me or someone else at ACMA. Now, with that, I'll go ahead and close out the webinar. I don't think we have any other questions here. I do see a request for contact information for our speakers. Both of our speakers are on LinkedIn. If you would like to reach out to them or myself as well, I can connect you. Once we close out the webinar, you will receive a recording of the webinar as well. So you will always have these insights, these expert tips that we've covered today in today's webinar. Before I leave and send you on your good days, I would like to thank both of our speakers for joining us today in their busy schedules. Thank you, Elisa. Thank you, Luca. We really appreciate this expert discussion and conversation that we've had.
Well, thank you both, and thank you for inviting me. I think it was a great conversation, and I really appreciated some of the things I learned from Luca as well. And thank you to all of the participants for your comments and your helpful questions.
As well, thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Kiana. Thanks, everybody, for being part of this very interacting and important discussion. And I wish you all a fantastic day.
Thank you. Everyone have a great rest of your day, rest of your week. We'll see you on the next webinar next month.